The smell of love and poison is in the air, which means Valentine's is nearly upon us. Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here, with a servant spotlight for Chaldea's most intoxicating beauty, Semiramis. We will be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize her effectively and an overall grade, comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 5-star servants. Now, let's take a look at Semiramis' stats. Semiramis has a max HP of 13,266 and a max attack of 11,309, which becomes 10,178 due to her class damage modifier. Her HP is slightly above average for a 5-star assassin, but her attack stat is pretty poor. Likewise, her attack is also subpar when held up against all the other 5-star servants, and even her HP is a little below average. Stats-wise, Semiramis, like most assassins, is underwhelming, although her high HP for her class does make her slightly better suited for tanking and supporting than damage. Taking a look at her skills, her first skill is Familiar Pigeon, rank D. It increases her own NP gauge between 20 and 30%, and also decreases the debuff resist of all enemies between 30 and 50%, both depending on level. Her second skill is Double Summon, rank B. It increases her NP gain for 3 turns between 20 and 40%, depending on level, and it also negates her class affinity against casters for 3 turns. And finally, her last skill is Alcohol of the Arrogant King, rank B+. It inflicts poison to all enemies for 3 turns, dealing between 500 and 1000 damage per turn, and decreases their buster card resist between 30 and 50%, both depending on level, although this skill does have the demerit of draining 8 crit stars upon activation. As for passives, Semiramis has a few. She has Presence Concealment rank C+, which increases her crit star drop rate by 6.5%, Territory Creation rank EX, which increases her arts card effectiveness by 12%, Item Construction rank C, which increases her debuff success rate by 6%, and Divinity rank C, which applies damage plus 150 to all of her attacks. Moving on to her deck and Noble Phantasm, Semiramis has an Arts deck with Quick, Arts Buster, and a Buster Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It increases her NP strength for 1 turn between 10 and 50% depending on overcharge. It also deals heavy damage to all enemies with between a 300 and 500% damage modifier depending on level. In addition, it also buffs the defense of all your allies by 20%. This NP can be upgraded through an interlude, which improves the damage modifier to between 400 and 600% depending on level, and also adds the effect of increasing buff removal resist of all allies for 1 turn by 100%. Taking a closer look at her cards, we see that her Quick card hits 4 times, her Arts hits 4 times, her Buster hits 4 times, and her Extra attack hits 5 times. She has an NP gain rate of 0.39% and a star rate of 24.7%. She does have a mediocre base NP gain from that low NP gain rate despite her high hit counts. However, she also has very poor star generating due to only having 1 Quick card. On paper, Semiramis isn't that impressive. None of her stats stick out as noteworthy, and in fact, her attack is quite low even for an assassin. Furthermore, despite having an arts-focused deck, Semiramis' base NP gain is mediocre, and despite being an assassin, she has no real star generating to speak of. But as I always say, skills make the servant, and fortunately for Semiramis, she has quite the repertoire of skills, some of which actively make up for her statistical shortcomings. For example, Semi comes with the much coveted Territory Creation rank EX, which goes a long way towards improving her NP gain. But if that wasn't enough, her second skill, Double Summon, gives her a potent 40% NP gain buff for 3 turns on a very short cooldown. The short cooldown can ensure that you have this skill active for most of the battle, and when combined with her Territory Creation, it makes her NP gain on arts cards quite good. This skill also has the effect of nullifying caster class advantage against her, although that is kind of irrelevant as 99% of the time you wouldn't want to take her against caster enemies anyway, although it does make her more viable for mixed cavalry nodes. Aside from her huge NP gain buffs, Semiramis also packs a straight up 30% NP charge on her first skill, Familiar Pigeon. This can give her quick and instant access to her Noble Phantasm and can ensure that she can get off 2 or even 3 NPs in some battles. Additionally, it also lowers all the enemy's debuff resist by 50%, which plays very well into her third skill, Alcohol of the Arrogant King. This skill poisons all enemies and lowers their buster resist by 50%. This is a huge debuff that is essentially equivalent to a party-wide mana burst, assuming it lands on all enemies, which isn't too hard to do given the debuff resists down on her first skill. However, great skills sometimes have drawbacks, and in Semi's case, this skill costs 8 crit stars to even use. Skill priority for Semiramis should be Alcohol of the Arrogant King first, as that is your best utility, followed by Familiar for a better NP charge, and then Double Summon last. Alternatively, if you want to use Semiramis exclusively for farming, then you can level Familiar first for that better NP charge. Speaking of farming, Semiramis' NP is an AoE buster that buffs her own NP damage prior to activation and also increases the defense of the party by 20%. After her NP interlude, it also gains the additional effect of increasing the party's buff removal resist. Semi's Noble Phantasm has a lot going on. It offers some raw damage and some utility. However, by focusing on both damage and utility, it falls somewhat short on both ends. Despite the NP buff attached to it, Semi's Noble Phantasm is weak compared to the other AoE assassins, even post-interlude. The NP damage buff that she has is just too small at 10%. The utility also just amounts to a 20% defense buff, which, while not bad, isn't game-changing either. Buff Removal Resist is an extremely niche piece of utility that combos well with some servants who have demerits that remove their own buffs, but it's too niche to ever really come into play. So in the end, Semiramis is left with a low-damaging Noble Phantasm that offers little niche support. And that is kind of a problem, given that her entire kit is based around her Noble Phantasm, given all the NP gain and charge buffs that she has. Thankfully though, it is strong enough to wipe out most enemy mobs, which gives her a nice role as a farming assassin with a good NP battery. But where Semi really shines is in her buster support capabilities. Essentially, she lives and dies by her third skill. A 50% buster resist down on all enemies is ridiculously strong, and it combos very well with many of the top buster servants. No other servant in the game has buster resist down on a skill, so she occupies a really unique role in buster teams should you choose to use her there. The major drawback to this skill though is it does consume 8 crit stars, which does make the skill somewhat unreliable unless you have a star generator or 2030 handy. Unfortunately, aside from her third skill, Semiramis doesn't have much else going for her. Her own star generating is bad, which is especially insulting considering her class. Her arts focused deck hurts her ability to deal damage and to create crit stars that she so desperately needs to activate her third skill. She's also fragile with no defensive skills at all aside from that minor buff on her NP, and the protection against casters on double summon is also lackluster, as unlike Nero's, it doesn't protect her from berserkers and alter egos, which makes it very situational. Still though, a good skill can carry a servant a long way, and Semiramis can excel in the right team. You'll want to primarily use Semiramis in one of two roles on the team, either as a farming servant who can take out the initial enemy wave, or as a buster support. If you want to use her for farming, she can pair well with servants who have NP batteries like Helena, Santa Altera, and Sanzo. Helena and Santa Altera provide a 20% NP battery and additional damage buffs for Semiramis, which can allow her to Noble Phantasm immediately while using CEs that give a 50% starting charge like Aerial Drive and Golden Sumo. This will make her first Noble Phantasm much stronger and capable of clearing tougher enemies. Sanzo can also be a useful support in longer fights, as her NP gain buff syncs up perfectly with Semi's, and both servants have a 3 arts card deck with Buster Noble Phantasms, which means lots of arts chains for more NP gain. Semiramis is also a very useful support for AoE Buster servants like Nobunaga, Gil, and Arturia. Gil and Nobu are good star generators who should be able to cover the cost of Semi's third skill rather reliably on their own, and they benefit tremendously from her Buster Resist down. Meanwhile, Arturia is also an AoE Buster servant who happens to have Intuition, which can be instantly used to proc Semi's third skill. And this is the case for all servants who have Intuition, whether it be the variations of Arturia, Mordred, or Proto-Arthur. Coincidentally, one of the few times Intuition can be extremely useful is when paired with Semiramis. Semiramis' Bondcraft essence is Ambiguous Wine. It boosts the party's Buster card effectiveness and NP strength by 10%. A very good CE to use if you're using her as a support. Other good support CEs for Semiramis include 2030, Fox Knight's Dream, and Holy Maiden leading Chaldea. Basically, you're going to want CEs that'll generate stars to make activating your third skill much easier. If you want to go down the farming route with Semi, then you should go with Golden Sumo, Aerial Drive, Kaleidoscope, or Black Grail. In the future, be on the lookout for Therapeutic Spa if you're using her as a support, and Welcome to Oniland if you're using her for farming. Overall, Semiramis is a unique addition to FGO. She can be a strong farmer thanks to her great NP charge and NP spam potential, and her Buster Resist debuff is a one-of-a-kind skill that can greatly buff most teams when used correctly. But unfortunately, requiring 8 stars to activate her best skill makes it a little unreliable, which is made worse by the fact that her own star generating is just so poor. She also lacks any real defense, her damage is mediocre even for an assassin, and her kit is too focused around spamming her rather lackluster Noble Phantasm. So all in all, Semiramis gets a B- from me. She can be a tremendous asset to the right Buster team, but she just doesn't offer much compared to the other assassins, including other better and easier to obtain farming assassins, and she's too overly reliant on her third skill to bring any utility to the team. And those are my thoughts on Semiramis. It's also worth noting that her kit complements Amakusa's very well. Not sure if that's intentional or not, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter. And I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Slowbrony out. Later.